time the dessert table had been picked clean and someone had spilled a full glass of red wine on the patio flagstone, I had already been introduced as basically family 4 times in one evening. That was my official title at any Whitmore gathering. Not a guest, not exactly. Just the guy who showed up reliably enough that Petra's mom had stopped setting a place for me and started assuming I'd find one myself. It was her parents' 35th anniversary. They'd rented out the back of a property in Prince Edward County, a big old farmhouse with a wraparound porch, string lights strung between the fence posts, and about 40 relatives who all seemed to know something about me that I hadn't been told. I'd driven up from Toronto with Petra on Friday, 4 hours in her Civic with a broken rear speaker and a bag of ketchup chips she kept refusing to share. She did this thing on long drives where she pick a topic and go deep on it. The whole way up, she talked about whether it's ethical to name a dog after a person you dislike so you can yell at it. I told her it was inspired. She said I was wrong. We didn't agree, but the 4 hours went fast. That was the thing about Petra Whitmore. Time always went fast. I'd known her since the 2nd week of undergrad at Queen's. We'd been paired for a group project neither of us wanted to do, ended up staying in the library until past midnight arguing about a methodology neither of us understood, and somewhere between the vending machine run and the walk back through the dark campus, we became the kind of friends where you don't have to explain yourself from the beginning every time. 7 years later, I was helping her uncle Dimitri find the corkscrew he'd hidden from himself for safekeeping, while Petra circled the yard making sure everyone had water and that her grandmother wasn't trapped in a conversation she couldn't get out of. She was good at events. She was good at people. She always knew when someone needed an exit. She came through the back screen door right as I found the corkscrew wedged behind the dish rack, and she looked at it the way you look at evidence. That was supposed to stay hidden, she said. I found it by accident. You were looking? Dimitri asked me to look. Dimitri's the last person who should be trusted with that information. She reached past me, took it out of my hand, and put it in the pocket of her cardigan. There. Problem solved. Her cousin Ren was watching from the kitchen doorway with the expression of someone who had just confirmed a theory. Ren was 23, recently finished a marketing diploma, and had recently developed what I could only describe as a professional interest in other people's personal lives. She'd been watching Petra and me at least 4 separate times that evening, with the kind of focused attention that made me a little nervous. You two are so weird, Ren said. Petra didn't look up from pouring a glass of water. You say that like it's a bad thing. I say that like it's a thing. Ren, I'm just standing here. You're standing there with a look. I have many looks. I handed Petra the water glass because she poured it and then forgotten about it. She took it without thinking. Ren's expression deepened, which I chose to ignore. The evening moved the way family evenings move when everyone's had just enough to drink and not quite enough to eat. Petra's dad gave a speech that was technically about the anniversary, but was mostly about a road trip he and his wife had taken through Nova Scotia in 1994. Her mom cried in the good way. Petra stood beside me for that part, close enough that I could feel her exhale when her mom laughed in the middle of crying. She's going to make him tell the whole story again later, Petra said under her breath. Is it a good story? It's a great story. That's the problem. He'll tell it 3 more times before the weekend's over. What happens in it? The car breaks down outside on Tyvanesh. My mom flags down a stranger for help. The stranger turns out to be a cousin of a cousin who they didn't know existed. That's a good story. I know. She smiled sideways. Don't tell him I said that. Ren caught my eye from across the yard and raised her glass with a look that meant something I deliberately did not decode. Later, after the cake and the toasts and the 3rd retelling of the Nova Scotia story, most of the older relatives filtered inside. The night had gotten cooler the way late August nights do, in the county, warm enough to stay out, but with a reminder underneath that it wouldn't last. Someone had put a playlist on from a Bluetooth speaker near the fence. Something old. 90s. The kind of music that sounds like someone else's memory. Petra's brother Kit had commandeered one end of the patio table with a few cousins. He was 26 and had strong opinions about things he'd just learned about, which made him fun for the first 40 minutes of any gathering. Ren had reappeared with a glass of something that was definitely not her first glass of something and installed herself at the other end of the table like she was hosting. Petra brought out the leftover butter tarts from inside. I don't know why I noticed things like that. The way she carries plates. The way she sets things down carefully. She'd been carrying things for people all evening. Extra napkins, a chair she dragged across the lawn for her aunt who didn't ask for it. but clearly needed it. A sweater she'd grabbed from inside for her mom before anyone realized her mom was cold. She sat down beside me and stole a piece of the butter tart off my plate without asking. "That was mine," I said. "You were distracted. I was listening to Kit." "No one should be listening to Kit right now. He's on his fourth take about interest rates. He's very passionate. He learned about compounding interest 2 weeks ago. He's insufferable." She ate the piece of tart. "Also, I saved you from that conversation twice, and you didn't thank me." "Thank you. That was too fast. It didn't sound genuine." It was extremely genuine. She looked at me for a second with that look she had, not suspicious, not amused, something between them, and then looked back at the yard. Good. Ren was watching again. I noticed only because Kit stopped talking for a second and Ren leaned across the table and said, quietly enough that she probably thought I couldn't hear, "I give it an hour." "An hour for what?" I asked. Ren looked up with the composure of someone who had absolutely been caught. "Nothing. A bet. A different thing." "What kind of bet?" "A private one." Petra set down her fork. "Ren, I'm not doing anything. You're doing a face. I have a right to my own face, not that face. That face means something." Ren pressed her lips together in a way that meant she was deciding something. Then she looked at her glass, then at me, then at Petra, then back at her glass. "Fine," she said. "I'll tell you something, but you can't be weird about it." "I'm always weird about things Ren tells me," Petra said. "Well, be less weird than usual." Ren turned to me. She pointed, which felt unnecessary. "You know that Petra turned down Owen's proposal." That part I knew. Owen had been Petra's partner for 2 years, and about 8 months ago he proposed, and she'd said no, and she'd told me about it 3 days later over the phone. She'd been calm about it in that way. She was calm about difficult things. Direct, clear-eyed, a little tired. She said it wasn't the right thing, and she'd known it for a while, and she was sorry it had taken her that long to be honest. I'd listened and asked if she was okay, and she said yes, mostly. I hadn't asked her why. That was the line I'd kept. "I know about Owen," I said. "Okay." Ren nodded like she was confirming something. "So, do you know why she said no?" Petra made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. Not a word, just a sound. "Ren," she said, "I'm just asking a factual question." "You're asking a factual question with your whole chest, and it's a lot. He deserves to know. He doesn't need to." "She told Mom," Ren said, looking at me now with the kind of directness that only comes from someone who has had just enough to drink to stop worrying about consequences. "And Mom told Aunt Sharon. And Aunt Sharon told me, which for the record is a violation, but I have useful information now, and I'm choosing to use it responsibly." "That is not what responsibly means," Petra said. "She said no," Ren continued, "because he wasn't you." The patio got very quiet. Not actually quiet. Kit was still talking. The music was still on. Someone inside was running water. But in the space of about 3 feet around us, everything stopped. I looked at Ren. She looked back, and then something changed in her face. The confidence slipped, replaced by something more like alarm. "Oh," she said softly. "Okay, yeah, I probably should have thought that through." Petra had gone completely still. "Ren," she said. Her voice was even, too even. "I can leave. You should leave." "I'm leaving." Ren stood up, collected her glass, and then paused because she couldn't quite help herself. "For what it's worth, I think it's a good thing. What I just said. I'm going now." She walked around the table and disappeared through the back screen door, the hinges making that flat slap sound behind her. Kit had stopped talking about interest rates. He looked between me and Petra and then down at his own hands. "I'm going to go check on Ren," he said, which was not true, but was kind. And then it was just the two of us and the music and the string lights and the leftover butter tarts and the sound of the speaker playing something slow that I didn't know the name of. Petra hadn't moved. I waited. I was good at waiting with her. I knew the rhythm of how she came to things. "You weren't supposed to hear that," she said finally. "I know. Ren has no sense of." She stopped, started again. "She's young. She's 23. She's emotionally 23. Petra." She looked at the table, at the plate, at nothing. "I'm not going to pretend she said something she didn't say. I know, but I don't." She exhaled. "I don't know what to do with you looking at me like that right now." "How am I looking at you? Like you're waiting for me to explain something. I'm waiting for you to say whatever you want to say. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that one song ended and another started, something older and slower. The reason I said no to Owen, she said, wasn't that he was bad. He wasn't bad. He was good, actually. He would have been good at being married to me in a lot of ways. She paused. But I catch myself thinking about, it sounds ridiculous. Say it anyway. She looked at me sideways. I'd think about the road trips, and who I'd want in the passenger seat. Another pause, and it was never him. I didn't say anything. That's not about you, she said quickly. That's not me saying something to you. I'm just telling you what happened in my head. It sounds a little bit like it's about me. She made a sound that was almost a laugh, but not quite. Yeah, okay, maybe a little bit. I turned my chair slightly so I was facing her instead of the yard. She didn't move away. The light from the string lights was catching the side of her face, which was not a thing I usually let myself notice, but I was having trouble with the usual rules tonight. How long? I asked. She looked at me. How long what? How long have I been the one in the passenger seat? She held my eyes for a second and then looked down at the table again. Her fingers found the edge of the plate and straightened it slightly, which was something she did when she didn't know what to do with her hands. A while, she said. How long is a while? I don't know exactly. A while. She looked up. A few years, more than a few. She said it simply, like a fact she'd already made her peace with. Not dramatic, just honest. My chest did something uncomfortable and specific. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. She gave the short, quiet exhale. Because what would happen after I said it? You know. And then everything we had would become about that. Every conversation, every trip, every 2 a.m. call when one of us can't sleep. It would have this other layer. This thing we were both aware of. And if you didn't feel the same way, I'd have made our whole friendship into something uncomfortable. And you'd be kind about it, which would somehow be worse. I would have been kind about it, I agreed. I know. She smiled faintly. That's part of the problem. I looked at the yard. The fairy lights were blurring a little at the edges where the mist was coming in off the lake. Someone had put a blanket over the dessert table. The Nova Scotia music was playing something I half recognized. Can I tell you something? I said. She waited. When you told me about Owen, about saying no, I stopped. Started again. I asked you if you were okay and you said yes, mostly. And I didn't ask anything else because there was a line, and I'd always stayed behind it. I know, she said softly, but I've known where that line was for a long time. I knew it because I drew it, and I kept drawing it further back every time every time I thought it might. I stopped. I have a habit of making decisions on your behalf about what you can handle hearing. She looked at me carefully. I told myself I was protecting the friendship, I said. That's the story I kept. I leaned forward on the table. But if I'm honest, I was protecting myself too. Because if I said it and you looked at me differently, not unkindly, just differently, I would have had to find a way to still be your person. And I didn't know if I could have done that. Petra's face had gone very still, not closed off, just absorbing. So you stayed, she said. I stayed. And you let me go through 2 years with Owen. You weren't exactly sending up flares. No, she said. I wasn't. She folded her hands on the table. We were both very committed to the bit. The bit of pretending we weren't. Yeah, she nodded once. That bit, right in the comments. Do you think we were right to protect what we had for so long, or did we just waste time being afraid? I genuinely want to know what you think. The back screen door opened and Wren appeared, holding a bag of all-dressed chips against her chest like a peace offering, and wearing the expression of someone who was very sorry but also very curious about how it had gone. I brought provisions, she said. Petra looked at her. I told you to go inside. I went inside, and then I came back. With chips. She held them out. I feel like I may have created a situation and I want to be present for its resolution. That is not how any of this works, Petra said. How's it going? On a scale of 1 to, Wren, I'm just inside. Wren looked at me. I pointed at the door. She clutched the chips closer. For the record, she said, I regret nothing except maybe the timing, and the delivery, and maybe 1 or 2 of the words. She backed toward the door. The screen swung open. You're welcome, she said, and disappeared. Petra put her face in her hands. I waited. She came back up and looked at me with this expression that was mostly exhaustion and partly something else. She's going to be like this forever, Petra said. Probably. I'm gonna have to thank her eventually. Probably. She looked at me for a long moment. The music had shifted again to something quieter. Inside the house, I could hear her parents talking, her dad's voice low and warm, the way it got when he was telling her mom something just for her. "I don't know what to do with all of this tonight," she said. "It's a lot of things to figure out in the backyard at 11:30. I know, but I don't want to do the thing where we pretend Ren didn't say what she said and then drive back to Toronto on Sunday and never mention it. We're not going to do that." She looked at me steadily. "You sound sure?" "I am sure." She considered that. "Okay." She exhaled. "So what do we do?" I looked at her, at the person who knew where I kept my extra keys, who had driven 2 hours to sit with me the night my dad was in the hospital, who texted me photos of strange clouds because she knew I found them interesting, who I had stood next to at dozens of kitchens and patios and unfamiliar parties and felt more at home than anywhere else. "I want to take you somewhere," I said. "Not as the person your cousins assume is already your partner, not as the guy who shows up and helps carry things. I want to take you to dinner. On purpose. Just us. And see what it feels like when we stop calling it something smaller." Petra was quiet. "I know a place on King Street," I said. "You've walked past it and said you wanted to go 4 separate times and never made a reservation." She blinked. "You remembered that? You say things once and think no one's listening." She looked at the table, at the string lights, at her hands, then at me. "Okay," she said, "just that. One word." "Okay as in yes?" I asked. "Okay, as in yes, you can make a reservation." She was smiling now, properly, the kind that she doesn't always let all the way out. "Okay, as in I've been walking past that place for 2 years and I never made the reservation because I always thought you'd be the one I'd want to go with." I leaned forward and she didn't move back, and I kissed her once. There in her parents' patio with the mist coming off the lake and the string lights humming and Ren definitely watching from the kitchen window. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was quiet and certain and long overdue. And when I pulled back, she stayed close enough that I could feel her exhale. "She's watching," Petra said without looking toward the window. 100%. She's going to text the group chat. She already has." Petra laughed quietly against my shoulder. I didn't pretend it meant less than it did. 6 weeks later, Ren made herself a title. She introduced herself at Petra's work holiday party as the Catalyst, and when Petra told her to stop, she said she preferred the Architect, and distributed that role equally to herself and the all-dressed Chips. She was extremely pleased with all of it. She earned some of it. Petra and I went to King Street 2 Saturdays after the anniversary. She ordered the halibut. I ordered wrong and ate half of hers. She didn't complain. On the way home, we stopped at a 24-hour place on Dundas for tea because neither of us wanted the evening to end, and we sat there for 2 more hours talking about nothing that mattered and everything that did. It felt exactly like all the things we'd already been doing, just finally called by its right name.